Hello everyone, this is my reaction to last week's Star Citizen Live Tech Talk with Benoit Beausejour. This was another 3 hours live stream. This video is not a summary, I only talk about things I find important.
Benoit, who are you and what do you do for Star Citizen?
Well, I am a developer, and I am the Chief Technology Officer for CIG. That means that I oversee everything technical, so gameplay engineers, engine engineers, graphic engineers, AI engineers, everybody who touches a computer almost, That's basically my job.
The year of playability is not necessarily a statement that we ever made. We didn't say it in the February show or whatnot. But it comes from that letter from the chairman that went out at the end of last year with I think it was like 2025, a focus on playability. It's a fair assessment of the mission that we set out for ourselves.
Here we have a letter from the chairman, December 2024. As we jump into the new year, our primary focus across our Star Citizen teams is clear: improving playability. Our drive for playability surrounds 3 critical areas: performance, stability, and content. A lot of people thought, fantastic, they are finally working on playability. That's so nice. And then I saw this on Spectrum. The epiphany we've had is, okay, we need to focus on how the game plays now. We've got to improve the quality of life. We got to improve the user experience. Chris Roberts wrote to release CitizenCon 2018. This means more than 6 years ago, Chris already played this card.
And we're running a live game, and that's sort of the epiphany that we've had internally, which is, okay, we need to focus on how the game plays now. We've got to improve the quality of life. We've got to improve the user experience, the UI, how you get into it, make it accessible, ensure that the gameplay right now is polished. We're not there yet, but we are definitely working towards that every single release, and that is a priority for us.
Yeah, Chris thinks we are stupid, Chris thinks we forget. Chris can just play the same hand again. Playability in year 13 is still trash, not even elevators work reliably. And Chris is not wrong, I actually forgot about this, so thank you very much for this screenshot. The problem with 2025, the year of playability, is Chris and CIG have played this card many times before, even back in 2018, 7 years ago.
We didn't take a whole lot of opportunities to stop and look at what was out there and spend time on fixing that and hardening that and stuff like that. It was always about, we got to get the next thing out. We got to get the next thing out. We got to get the next thing out, because we have many of the same thoughts our backers do. It's like you got to get this stuff out.
Jared is now playing the card. We had to get this stuff out. Jared, this is not the truth, and you know it. Chris and CIG are talking about playability at least since 2018. Why should it be different this time?
How's this year of playability going? What have we done? What have we achieved? Where are we at in our process? Are we happy?
Well, I mean, I want to go a bit further out than just the beginning of the year, right? Because let's take same date last year. Right?
Okay.
So let's go full 1 year back. The state of the game 1 year in the past was still single server DGS, right? So we're talking about maximum 100 players per game shard, one server simulating all of the universe, no second star system, right? So only one star system. Server performance, not good.
4 or 5
right?
frames.
Yeah, I mean, if you're lucky,
You're
right?
lucky. Like when you load it in.
Like the parameters for us to launch a patch was basically 7-ish, which is horrible if you think about it. And so that was last year, right? So we start from far, right?
We were still in the clutches of 30K.
We were still in the clutches of 30K, correct? So we did have some level of server recovery, but a lot of issues related to it that could have side effects. Some of them are still present. We'll talk about some of those. And so, fast forward to now, like the assessment is a lot better.
I have to agree, we have way less 30Ks, they are hardly ever occurring anymore. We have much higher server FPS, and we have a player cap of 400 players per server shard. Of course, CIG is not finished, CIG is still working on improvements. However, from a player point of view, performance, lag, interaction delays, and those things are still absolutely terrible. We have those things of players moving at player speeds. And it's much worse with ship combat, even with CIG's slow, no fun master mode. Not even elevators work reliably in year 13. Here's an example of do-things of players moving at player speeds and do-things of spaceships. This was very recently.
We get per territory stats now. So basically we don't just get like server FPS is X, right? We're going to know Stanton server FPS is X, or, you know, Hurston server FPS is Y. And so we can compare, depending on which territory, what performance we're getting. And FPS is just one of those parameters, right? There's a lot more.
Yes, there's a lot more, but you, Benoit, put a lot of emphasis on server FPS. You also have to look at lag spikes and 1% lows. And here Star Citizen in year 13 is still absolutely terrible. It doesn't help if you have, say, 30 server FPS, but a lot of lag spikes, a lot of 1% lows. These are the things players notice and players are annoyed by.
Nowadays, on average, server FPS is up 20 easily, right? Obviously, some zones, like let's say when we launched, I think, Stormageddon, there were some issues affecting those zones that made those servers like dip below that quite a bit, and so they drag the average down. But overall, the game server performance is way better.
Please don't put too much emphasis on server FPS. This doesn't help anyone. And even 20 server FPS is way too low for ship combat. The most annoying problem are the lag spikes and 1% lows. I suggest play the game for a few minutes and look how you feel as a player. Does this feel good? No, because 20 server FPS is way too low and we have lag spikes and 1% lows.
Now that we've got kind of the big organizational changes in, that we're starting to see and reap the rewards of it, which is I hope is showing in the game. Anyway, it's showing for me, so I'm seeing it. So that's, you know.
Benoit, do you even realize CRG is playing the same song and dance for more than 10 years by now? Now that we have the new tools, now that we have the new people, now that we have the new planet tech, now that we have X, we can be so much faster and content will be pouring in so quickly now. Same song and dance for more than 10 years and we see nothing of it in year 13.
We've shipped 8 or 9 patches this year.
Yeah.
It depends on whether you count what happened in April as a patch or not. But we've shipped at least 8 patches this year. And in years past, you know, from the 3.0 era on, it was 4 a year. You know, if we were like some 1 or 2 years, we only hit 3 and whatever. And now we've done 8 in this year. The velocity change has been tremendous.
Jared used this argument before and it still falls flat. Yes, there were a lot of patches this year, but almost all patches had no new content except a new ship or new mission. I wouldn't count a patch that gives us 1 new mission a full patch, but you do.
I'm going to use the word desperately. We desperately want this tech preview with engineering out before the end of the year. Now, this is the middle of September. It's still October, November, December. That's still a lot of time. It's not any time when anybody would say soon. And that's no guarantee that we're even going to hit it.
Of course, this is not a guarantee and you won't hit it. Engineering was supposed to come in 3.24, if I remember correctly. Me personally, I'm not looking forward to engineering. Instead of making engineering fun, CRG will make engineering very tiresome, very awkward, very tedious, and very much a time sink.
Filter, that is also a new item that is added as the consumable for the live support generator. I can tell you it's already quite a lot that you have to manage and learn. So it will be fun. It will be fun. It will be fun. It will be fun.
Why not have a set time for the servers to, in the back end, to just reset every day?
The issue that you get is that it's not just resetting the server. So, you know, rebooting the servers, reloading the game shard from persistence and continuing, you're going to get right back in the same situation. So let's imagine We're going to talk about cleanup and density a bit later, but let's go back to the 3.x days where we persist all the data in the shard and we have deep intersections. So a ship entered another ship, it's an intersection, it's costing on the server. The server FPS is now shit, super low physics threads, using all the resources. And then you're like, okay, cool, let's do a daily reset, right? It's going to fix that, right? So you go through it, you reboot it. Cool. Now server reloads from persistence and those ships are still intersecting. And so you're right back where you were. So if you would look at the graphs and you'd see FPS super low, 0 during the reset, 30, 5, instantly. And so, what we've done in the past for this is now we have way more systems to deal with like this to reclaim performance, right, for these cases. So first of all, we detect them. But also we do emit fresh shards periodically. So we kind of decide when that happens. But when we do massive maintenances, weekly maintenances, we don't take every week, but we do it when we have to make configuration changes or things like that. We'll take a downtime and we're probably going to emit new shards or run the repair on some of those shards. And then that will help. So we kind of do that. We just don't do it systematically because the reality is that's not completely how it works. For the backend persistence side of this, and it's not something that we can solve easily because the conditions are too great. You need the shard to be live to solve these things.
The issue I have with this answer is we are not talking about resetting everything. We are mostly talking about cleanup. We have ships that were falling to the ground and blocking a freight elevator. Why not remove those ships? Do we really need to find the bottle we threw into the woods 4 weeks earlier? I don't think so. Why not remove ships that were not charged for 8 hours? Actually, sometimes CRT does remove ships we just used, we need. On the other hand, sometimes there are ships for days at the very same spot, taking up server performance. We also have a lot of junk that falls into the center of planets and moons, taking up server performance for no benefit at all.
At the moment, we run at a 10 game server per shard setup. And so that means that we basically distribute the key areas, on these 10 game servers. And that's how when you transition from one zone to another, it's seamless, but you're moving from one server to the other. So we've been kind of taking the year to get used to being in a server mesh environment. And so that means we've discovered a bunch of gameplay bugs related to this. I think we talked about some of those in January, but that have been solved. But for example, the quantum drive systems, didn't properly handle the transition. Sometimes we'd lose power in transition, and then that would cause the thing to reset, pull you out of quantum, things like that. That's one example, but there's a series of other issues that were related to that.
Yeah, for example, losing vehicles stored inside ships when we are going through the wormhole or when we are quantum jumping between planets. Doesn't happen all the time, but happens quite often.
Dynamic server meshing tomorrow, next week? What you got?
So, no, well, I'm not going to advance a date, but I can tell you that there's multiple things that compose dynamic server meshing, right? Obviously, the team is working on those aspects right now, right? The key aspects that dynamic server meshing will bring is so a kind of arbitrary subdivision, right? Meaning that we could assign a server to anything that's a streaming group. So inside this big tree, right? You've seen the PES discussions where we show how kind of the data is laid out in one big giant scene tree. Any of those nodes that are deemed a streaming group can actually have a server actually having authority over that entire area. And so DSM will definitely bring us the ability to kind of arbitrarily subdivide where we're no longer tied to these territories or this territory map. That's the first big thing we're gonna gain from dynamic server meshing, and we're working on that part at the moment, right? Which is basically how we can move these streaming groups from one server to the other, how authority is transferred, who's managing it, what component is taking care of that. So that's under development right now.
Of course, no one expected a release date for dynamic server meshing. I really hope dynamic server meshing can fix lag, interaction delays, and do things.
There's also a lot of parallels or similarities between dynamic server meshing and instancing, right? And so we've talked about that we're working on instancing. That's also part of this work, right? And so we technically already have the mechanics of instancing in the game in the form of the instance hangers.
Roughly 25 years ago, a lot of MMOs started to instance dungeons, for example, Dark Age of Camelot. I always liked the idea of instancing small segments like a dungeon. You can be on your own, but you're still in MMO, you just have to leave the dungeon. I'm looking forward to more instancing in Star Citizen.
So that when you enter an instance, we can guarantee a certain level of performance without needing to have a little, you know, dude at the back going like, oh, we need to change the territory map for this, right? Basically. And so we're actively working on all this stuff right now to bring us to the dynamic part of server meshing.
Freight elevators.
Yeah.
Now, I already did a big 5-minute thing explaining. Oh, there's a delay. He just popped up. Freight elevators. Where are we at now? Where are we at now? What's happening? What happened? What do you want to tell us about freight elevators?
Let me pull up my notes.
Okay.
So freight elevators is one of our hero squads, right? Now, your previous interventions, that came way too late in our planning, right? And so that's one thing that, I think that if we could go back in time, that squad would have started way, way, way earlier. And so I've got a bunch of discussions.
I'm sorry, to be clear, work had started earlier. We hadn't had the hero squad on it.
Correct, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Good clarification. And so let me go through some of the stuff that we've been going through on freight elevators in general. So to start with, obstruction issues, right? And so a lot of the issues that we ran into were related to how the elevator actually detects obstructions and or contents. And so, for example, blocking the doorway, item being positioned on the roofs of the planetary freight elevators. Now, a lot of this, by the way, like I'm going to talk more about the planetary versions of it, which are 10 times worse for some reason. But in terms of obstructions, like you could leave items on top of the elevator, and then it was detected as an obstruction, right? And so these obstructions, first of all, the checks were super rough. And so they would go, there's something, I'm not going to move, which is what a bit like, come on,
So somebody would put a smoltz bottle on top of the freight elevator.
Correct.
And the whole damn thing would stop working.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. That would brick the whole elevator until that was removed.
Also, ships glitching through the ground blocked freight elevators, which again leads to the question, why not remove things that are glitched to the ground periodically? I don't mean once a week, maybe once every hour. No one needs a ship that was glitched through the ground.
For the bounds issue, what we're doing is we're adding a lot more checks on how the things are submitted again beforehand. So we're revisiting all bounds for items, right, and how their setup is made to make sure that none of them can be in that situation. So we're kind of doing a system-wide check on this in order to make sure that when we get into these situations, it's going to work the way we think it should. Let's continue on our list of bugs with freight elevators, right? The UI and platforms could get out of sync. And so this is where the platform will have content. So there's clearly a box on the thing, and the UI is showing that it's empty, right? And so that prevents you from, basically makes the whole thing inoperable, because now you can't ship your box at all. And so in this case, I think that the reconnection, the streaming reconnection actually solves this by self-healing, but also the UI will requery multiple times to be able to make sure it's always updated. This is a side effect of us of the game teams trying to cache a bit more data than they should. And so now it cached an empty elevator. And so that's a weird state.
You've mentioned something called self-healing.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. What's self-healing?
Well, so self-healing is basically when we add functions to a system to detect that it's in a bad state and attempt to fix it, right? And so you could call it a kludge in some areas, right? Sometimes it's not the right thing. But I think that in this case, for a lot of the systems that we have, where we are working on a replacement, for example, and we're trying to keep this one running, self-healing will come in and basically rectify the situations, right? We have the way our game is made with this, our streaming system makes some trivial things in a normal game very complex. And sometimes we have run into these issues where the game teams can't really identify what's specifically causing an issue. They just know it happens, right? And so in the past, we used to wait for the key engineers that can actually decipher these conditions to come in. But these guys are obviously, everybody's swamped with work. And so sometimes the delay was so long that you guys as players would have to deal with the condition for long periods of time. And so self-healing is basically an approach where we're telling the game developers, well, while you're investigating the proper root cause for this, provide a self-healing alternative, right? Which keeps the system running properly.
Cleanup. Entity cleanup seems like it'd be the obvious thing. Just crank that dial up to 500 and clear that shit off of there every 2 minutes, and it seems like a good fix. Talk to me about entity cleanup. We're seeing ships left everywhere. We're seeing trash left everywhere. The Raptor's not here yet. What can you talk to us about entity cleanup?
I talked about cleanup earlier in this video. Why is there not more cleanup? Maybe because Chris wants to find a bottle he threw into the woods weeks earlier.
But the proper persistence is I go anywhere, I take my Elroy's cup, put it, get my coffee at the space station, I take it with me, I get on the spaceship, I fly to a planet, I walk in a forest, I litter, I drop it on the floor in the forest, I get off, I fly away, and then Sean flies to the forest and sees an Elroy cup when he arrives in that area. So,
and I grab it and I sell it.
Yeah, there you go.
But then you come back and you think that there's a bug in the game because it's gone, whereas in reality, Sean took it.
Yeah, so the second stage of the SOCs is the full persistence comes in with what we call the iCache, which basically will save out all the state and position of any item in the game when you move away from it. So if you have to, which is what's happening on the server right now, it streams out like what's there, and right now we're persisting it in the server's memory, but we aren't persisting it back to a cloud database just yet.
Since then, right, since the beginning of the year, we've unified a lot of the cleanup systems, right? So namely, we had an abandoned vehicle tracking system, we have the physics intersection cleanup system, we have the actual density manager, and so now all of this has been kind of unified into one platform. And so what we're able to do with this now is we have density classes. So depending on the type of item, we can define the density class, which basically allows us to say no more than X in a volume of Y for this kind of item, right? And obviously there's way more parameters. I'm just trying to keep it simple so we can understand what it does. We've recently added the ability for designers to basically change those density classes, basically vary these density classes by region. And so now they can say, in this location, make this super aggressive, make this less aggressive, right? And so the density manager part of this is really about just items in the game world that are dynamic, that we want to make sure we keep at a manageable level, right? And so if you start putting water bottles in one place, at some point, it'll start cleaning up because they're in the same volume, and the density class of the water bottle will inform how many we want to keep and how we want to do that. There's also lifetime cleanup. So things we want those to live, but we want them to disappear after a certain amount of time. So we've added that functionality in, so that's a lot better. And then vehicles come into play. So abandoned vehicles, we've been tuning this since the beginning of the year behind the scenes. This in the physics cleanup. So the abandoned vehicles is basically when you leave a vehicle completely abandoned. So no passengers, nobody's left on it. It's left on a planet. You leave it there. Already, it's put on a timer, right? And so at some point, we'll have to clean this up, right?
The problem with cleanup in Star Citizen is sometimes nothing happens for days and weeks, and sometimes people are getting ships removed they just left. So I guess there are still bugs. And what about Chris? I thought Chris wants to find a cup he put into the woods even weeks later, something that has no gameplay relevance.
If it gets interacted with, if passengers come in to play on it, whatever, that revives it, resets the timer, right? I think, if I remember right, that's set to something like 2 hours right now, something like this for abandoned vehicles, regardless of class for now. So that is something we want to add, which is basically change the density class for larger ships so that maybe they go faster. This is the kind of thing we need to keep tuning. And then so the abandoned vehicles will actually clean up those areas, right? Now, with the new system we have now coming in, we'll be able to override these values per region. And so for planet side locations where we know there's going to be traffic, we can make that a lot more aggressive. And the last part of the cleanup system is the pink slip. I call it the pink slip, which is, hey, my ship turned pink, and bam, it's gone, right? Which is basically when areas of the game where your ship is entering into a deep intersection with something else, right? And this is true of all areas, right? So if something enters deep intersection for a number of frames based on the size of the entities, size of the area, we will clean it up, right? We're going to first turn it pink, full pink, for a certain amount of time, and then poof, it disappears. The reason for that is because the servers are still very much physics bound, and there is no currently, I'm not saying it's impossible, but currently there is no elegant way to kind of break those collisions automatically. For everybody's sake, just to make sure we're all on the same page, the transit system is the system that drives elevators, not freight elevators, trains, and some areas base transit for these things. So the transit system has been the bane of our existence.
No, I think it's fine. We think it's going to be. We don't think it's fine. It's just we got self-healing in, and it can carry us until the new thing comes in, and that's transport system.
Correct. Go. So transport is a complete rewrite of transit, right? Which has a much different approach to how it manages peripherals, things you click on to call up things, gateways, which are the areas at which the carriages stop, and carriages, of course. And so the transport system is a lot more resilient in its approach to streaming problems, which has been a thing in the past, right, for the transit. It's also, the way it's developed is a lot more robust.
Basically, what Benoit says here is, transport system is old code. People who wrote the old code are not working for CRT anymore. It's not compatible with server meshing, and it will be rewritten. I'm looking very forward to this.
For ATC, while we're completely not happy with its stability overall or the queue times, which is the one thing that we're actually looking at the moment, is to make sure that the system works the way we want it. That's why we've put all these metrics in about at this location, the time to exit is this, at this location is this. Do we have enough gateway? Does the system perform the way it should? So we're still in an info gathering phase here to have the proper plan. But we do know one thing, is that we are going to change the way the interaction between ATC and hangars actually work. Currently, ATC manages everything. Like I said, it gives you your landing area. It says, hey, I need an instance at this gateway. Path spawns your hangar, instance created, all that stuff. Adds that instance tag to your player, then the doors open. Now you can get into your hangar, but now ATC sees the pad in your hangar as his landing area. He's managing this, right? And so he's taking care of all that stuff, which is a bit problematic because it's an old system. We know of its flaws. And so we do want to split these responsibilities so that there's a hangar manager.
Yeah.
So that the moment that you're done going through those doors, that's it, done. ATC's out of the picture. Now you're completely in your hangar, and the hangar manager takes care of this. And so that we've been doing tech design on this, but unfortunately, because of the different focuses we have this year, this is one casualty that I was not able to push forward on.
Yeah, there's some of these stations that have like 10, 15, 20 doors, but you'd swear the ATC only ever uses one or two of them.
Yeah, that's the one thing that we want to solve, even with the old system, before we even start hangar management.
Yeah, sometimes you have hangar queues of several minutes, even up to 15 minutes. Now, one reason for this surely is ATC's old code, but I don't think that's all, because if a lot of players are in a certain area, for example for Invictus, even an up-to-date ATC code cannot handle all those players without waiting time. To me, it looks like CRT gave us server meshing with a much higher player count, but they didn't think about the consequences.
To me, the most demoralizing, the most heartbreaking, the most aggravating thing is when your stuff disappears. It's just that simple. You spend hours in there. You work your butt off. There are people who get together with members of their org to work towards earning a Polaris from Wicklow, and if they manage to put all their stuff on the elevator and the elevator doesn't eat it, they then get their Polaris, they then get their Atlas, ICTY, they then get their F8C, whatnot, and they have it. And then we release a patch which we used to do every 3 or 4 months, and now we've been doing every month. So as an unfortunate side effect of our change in our philosophy, we exasperated this problem, and now it's a gamble. It's a crapshoot. Every time we release a patch, it's just who gets to keep it, who gets to lose it.
I have to agree, this is really one of the most annoying things in Star Citizen. Of course, it's an alpha. Of course, vibes are to be expected, but you shouldn't lose ships and items between patches when there was no vibe. Last patch, I bought them all in-game for Alpha UEC with the money my viewers gave me to test the Quantanium explosions, but now it's gone and there was no vibe.
Let me describe a bit how this works currently. So when you acquire a ship from, let's say, the web platform, right? That ownership record lives on the web platform. It's in there, right? And every time you log into the game, we check, oh, this guy has this thing. Does he have that ship in the game? In his entitlements, right?
It's called an entitlement. That's an important term.
That's your entitlements, right?
That's your entitlement.
And you view your list of ships. What you're actually viewing is your list of entitlements, right? These are not your ships. These are actually your entitlement records. Let's go into, now I go to New Deal and I buy a ship with UEC, right? That will actually give you an entitlement, right? Because you can claim those ships, right? You can transfer those ships. So now, at that point, up to now, these will work identically, right? But when you log into the game, we don't reconcile from an outside source your list of purchased in-game ships. They are just entitlements in your account, right? And that's it. We keep them. Okay. Let's stay on ships for now, right? Before we get the items.
Let's stick with ships.
Now, the thing that's important to know here is that the actual ship you're playing with, the amount of possible states for that ship are almost infinite, right? You could leave the ship in space. You could leave it in your friend's hangar. For some reason, people are able to do that. You can stow it in inventory. It can be inside an Idris that's stowed in someone else's thing. All kinds of stuff can happen. And so there's multiple paths to update that specific state of that ship. Whereas your entitlement, once you have it, you have it. That's why your ASUP terminal always has it. When you acquire things in game and you have ships that you own, right? The way LTP was designed, and maybe this is the part that, there's a mistake there, right? But still, I'll explain how it works. When you stow something in an inventory that you own, the systems will create what we call LTP records. These LTP records basically say they're close to what an entitlement is, right? But they say Jared owns a Hawk, right? And those are stored in another database, right? That is outside the game environment and lives cross patches, right? And so now when we wipe the entitlement database and we wipe the game database and we start fresh from a new patch, when we reconcile your account the first time, we're going to give you your web purchaser for sure, and we're going to give you back your LTP records. And so that will create those entitlements. That's the intent. Now, the problem is, right, we need to make sure that we always stow the stuff back into inventories that we own properly and that those records actually save properly, right? And it turns out that there's a million goddamn ways in which stuff gets stowed in this game. And so, for example, claiming a ship by insurance, then you get the ship, it gets stowed from another path. And in that path, the LTP wasn't correct. We've had cases where we tried to fix bugs related to the F7C turrets, for example, that got disconnected, that were a default loadout item that we didn't want to wipe when you claimed insurance on it. And that messed up the LTP records for it. And so this whole thing basically is very fragile. And so what we realize now is that the list of LTP records and the way we update them is not always a slam dunk. In fact, there are a bunch of cases where the record's not updated right.
Yes, people are still missing the Heatsink Mark II turrets.
Destroyed, right? Or whatever. And now you have the claim button, right? And you're like, oh, cool. Yeah, I'll do that later. And you leave the game. And then we patch. You don't have that ship. Because when you unstowed the ship to the game shard to play with it, we remove the LTP record for it. Right? That's the way the system is designed. Now, we're going to change that because that's, there's too many paths in which stuff gets stowed that could lead to problems or that don't respect the rules properly. And that's what we've come to realize. And so without going into too much details about how we do this, right? But this is a bit part of our item imprint epic, right? So very large approach there, because we always said item recovery tier 0 is just tier 0. So there's more item input work there. But part of this is a revamp of how we deal with long-term persistence.
Thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye. Auf Wiedersehen.
No. Hi, I'm Mark Hamill. Though starring in Wing Commander, I'm also featured on Mask of the Phantom. Wow. Now this can be yours for Oh, troublemaker. Yeah. Look at that. Look at that top. Look at that. That's real plastic, too. That is. See, what you do is you open it.
Towards Billy Butler.
You open it, and then you smell the plastic. Oh, that was a good week. Very good week.
Hey, have you got those plastic champagne glasses we asked for?
Oh, dear me.
There you go, Tom.
That's very kind of you. You didn't have to do that. This would be just fine. The way I drink.
Oh, Cliff.
Hey, don't start with me, Bernard. Thank you. That's very nice. Man, if you people weren't in costume.
Chris isn't.
Hey, you're still here. You might want to join me on Twitter or on Blue Sky.